Hello, my name is Daniel Hafner, and I am the Capstone lead for the team Hello World. Please enjoy this presentation for the work we completed as a part of the Portland State Computer Science 2021 Winter+Spring Capstone. My amazing team is composed of Mackenzie Gage, myself, Michael Lawrence, Theodore Lee, Tommy No, Tuan, Nguyen, Isaiah Shikina, and Devon Wilson. Our sponsor is Joshua Wolsborn on behalf of Gresham Golf Course. Gresham Golf Course is a beautiful 18-hole public golf course in the heart of Gresham, Oregon. The superintendent of the course keeps detailed records of all the chemicals he applies for both his own information as well as for safety in the event that OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, were to need this information. Currently, these records are kept in binders on paper copies that can be wieldy and obviously can make it difficult to track the data. This is why our sponsor came to us to create something new. The sponsor asked us to create a web application that would meet these following requirements. Digitize the current version of the paper form. The user should be able to enter in the information for a chemical for easy entry later. Sort chemical applications by date, chemical, use, temperature. A calendar feature so the user can step back and see applications done over a week, month, year. And finally, the data needs to be persistent and stable. The data could be shown to OSHA that all applications were done appropriately. Using these requirements, we have created ChemTracker. ChemTracker is a web app that is designed for Gresham Golf Course to capture the application of chemicals on different days to different locations around the course. The user is able to create, edit, remove, and search records of the chemical applications. Please enjoy the following demo.
So the login component, very simple, very straightforward. We actually didn't add any kind of create account or create a user or anything like that. It's just a master username and password. So very simple. Go ahead, click that. So now we're logged into our app. This is our homepage. Nice little directory to do a bunch of different actions. We have a calendar, an add form, templates, search forms. And to talk about the add form, I'm going to hand it off to Kenzie.
This is our add form homepage. You can either add a new form from scratch on the left, or you can add from template. We'll start by adding one from scratch. You see here, this form, we have required fields and various fields, different input types, checkboxes, radio buttons. All these required fields line up with what our client wanted. And these required fields are important for our database. You can see if we click this other button on any of these, it pops up a little text box to fill out the specialized location. Down below, we've got more fields. We have a date picker here so that you can choose the date. This is important because it ensures that the user will always select a valid date, and we can search by this later and use this in our calendar.
Just talk about you just talked about the date picker, so talk about
3, 2. So similar to the date picker, we have this time picker down here. You can use it, pops up a little clock so our client can select a time. Let's go with 12. Let's go with 1 p.m. on this, Tommy. Perfect. Then we can set the end time to something like 1:30 p.m. Great. And then down below, we got more fields. We've got these last two required fields. If we try to submit without signature, it'll let us know that we need it. So if we go ahead and fill that out, submit, it lets us know the form is saved. And it takes us back to this page. We can now check out the template, the add from template page. So these are all of our test templates we have saved in the back end right now. You see that it has product name, supplier, and formulation shown. If you click on the product name or supplier, you can sort alphabetically, ascending and descending. Let's go ahead and click that top one, test product 2, and then go down to the bottom. We can use this template And you see at the top of the page that it loads in our test product and then the formulation, signal word, and then the EPA. And these are consistent across, multiple products. So that's why it's important to have a template for this. Next, we can head over to the calendar.
All right. Yeah, so this is the calendar that we ended up using. One of the main features is when you click back or next in the top left corner to switch months, it automatically repopulates the calendar with events that represent each form with the current selected date. So, and then if we were to click on a day that has an event or form listed for it, it'll list out all of the forms for that day. And if you want to double click on one of the events representing a form, Modal pops up and it gives you all the details of that form. Yep, you can close that, and we've got a month, day, and week view to view the all the forms or events for. And I think that is just about it for our calendar.
So next up we have search. This is the search forms. So there are 3 fields here that you can fill out. To search by, there's product name, date range, the start date and the end date, and then a location. This form you're able to search by any of the fields. So by product name or by a date range or by location or any combination of these fields. So let's go ahead and search what we just added. And then go ahead and hit search. The table will appear here that shows the product name, the date, and the signature. So as you can see, the form we added is in here and we're able to search it. And so now when you click here, it will open a modal, read-only modal. So all the fields are disabled, but it populates all the field of this chemical right over here, date applied, all of that. And if we want to make edits, we just go down here, click make edits, and now all these fields become enabled. So we can go ahead and change whatever field we would want to. So add supplier here, we can click that. We can also change, let's say, date, change the date. Let's change that 1 day and change the signature. You can do all of that. And then once you're done, you can just go ahead and hit submit, and it'll load and it'll say this alert that says form has been saved. And then now if we close it,
fix that.
Okay, so now it brings us back to the search page. Let's go ahead and search again. Let's do a start date, something like that. Let's make sure we get the right one. Let's go ahead, and it brings us back up. So now that the changes we made have been saved here, and as you can see, the date changed. And then let's say we wanted to delete this form. We can go ahead and hit delete this form. It'll ask us to verify that we do want to delete this form. And if we do, we go ahead and hit delete. Okay, it deletes the form and brings us back to the search page. And then go ahead and close this alert and you can search again.
All right. Another functionality we added was adding templates. As Kinsey demonstrated earlier, templates are pretty central to our app because it allows our client to enter in commonly entered information for chemicals and just allows for fast data entry. So we have a create new template or edit an existing template. If you click on create new template, we can kind of go through that workflow. So the only required thing here is the product name. If you just enter in, template, whatever, that works. You can enter in any of this information. It'll be saved out in the database. So go ahead, create that template. We'll get a nice alert. Cool, our template is saved, so you can exit out of that. It'll take us back to the template homepage here. And then if we wanted to, something about that chemical changed, we can go back in there with edit existing template, which will pull up a little search bar. We can search for that template, pull that up, and then edit here as we like to, exactly, add a couple fields here just to check it out. And when you hit save template, it'll take you back to that form home. So if you want to just pull it up again with edit existing template, we'll see all of the data was saved.
For the calendar, we decided to use a React Big Calendar. We were able to just import React Big Calendar and add features that we wanted to the React calendar. It was pretty easy. One of the first things that we worked on adding was having forms populate the calendar. This was done by creating events that React calendar was already tailored for. And to make those events meaningful, we had to bring in data from the database with an API call and reformat the JSON objects to be event objects that contain the meaningful information that we needed. And then the React calendar was able to just seamlessly populate itself with those events. And the React Big Calendar also gave us a month, day, and week view. So when you go to the day view, it'll show you all of the events that are in that day. Obviously, multiple events can be added for a day, but you can't see all of them from the month view. So the day view is useful in that way. And then we've got an automatically display date so that every time the user clicks next or previous on the calendar and switches months, repopulate the calendar with events for that given month. Then we were able to add a custom modal component. So when you click on a day, a modal pops up with information for forms for that day.
The add form feature was an essential part of our project. We had to work closely with our sponsor to make sure that we had all the fields that they needed to add a new chemical form. We based our form off an existing form and tried to line up the paper form with a digital form. Our form has many different types of inputs. We have regular text types, we have checkboxes, we have radios, and we even have date and time pickers. Some of these fields are required. The requirement is important because it allows us to store it in the database and then later get the forms based off of those values.
The search form starts off with a card where you can search. It has 3 fields: product name, a date range, which is a start date and an end date, and then a location field. You're able to search by either one field or a combination of these 3 fields. Implementing this, I had to create API calls that does specific things. So for example, if a user wants to search by just the product name, I had to make sure it was an API call just for the product name. Or for example, if it's a range, a date range and a location, it has to be a separate function for that. So that included like 9 functions for all combinations. But once you do search, you don't get any results. It will say no forms found. Or if you try to search by empty search criteria, it'll also say you have to search by at least one field. But once you do finish that and search it, you will get a table back that displays all results that fit the search criteria. This was also, an API call that then returns a JSON object. I render that object onto the table, and then on this table, each chemical will have its own link that if you click on will open a modal, and this modal will be populated with all the data of that chemical form. From there, that's how you can access, so from the table, that's how you can access the results to get to the modal. The form modal is kind of the glue for everything, because that's where you can look at the chemical fields that you inputted or added, and that's where you can edit and delete forms. So once, for example, from the search form, once you click the link from the display table, it'll pop up this modal and it'll populate all the fields into that modal and display it. And then from there, if you were to scroll down, you can click a button that says make edits. If you were to click make edits, the fields that were disabled now become enabled. And from there, you're able to make any edits you like. To implement this, I had to use Bootstrap's Modal, React-Bootstrap's Modal, and from there I had to take the data I had from the call, from the function call, that's a JSON object, and then map it where once you click it, it will select a certain index, and from there it will populate the modal with the index number of the chemical entry you clicked. So from there, you would have to initialize each value and state with the JSON object you get from either the search table or the calendar. And then so once you go into there and you click make edits, you're able to change any field you like. And then from there, once you're ready, you can hit submit to submit the changes you have made. And once you do, that will do a put call, API put call that sends that form back to the back end. And using the ID, you're able to change and edit the fields you like while keeping the fields that you don't want to edit stay saved in the back end. Once you do this, it will give you an alert that says you have saved this form successfully. Another action you could do is delete a form. So in the modal, you're able to hit the delete button, and that will ask you to verify. It will pop up another modal that will ask you to verify that you do want to delete this form. If you do hit delete again, what will happen is it will send an API delete call using the ID, and then from there you're able to delete the form in the back end. And then on the front end, you will see that the modal closes. You go back to the search or the calendar, depending on what page you were at in the first place. And then it will say form successfully deleted.
So a feature that I worked on was the template feature. This is a really important feature because it allows us to save commonly entered fields for certain chemicals so that later on we can enter in that form for the chemical much quicker than we otherwise could. So diving into the create new template, this is pretty straightforward. It's just a React-Bootstrap form. So as far as the style and design goes, it was really easy to implement. Now, the product name is required before we can ever create or save this template. And that's because on the database, everything's organized by the product name. All the templates are organized by the product name. So that's the key to the database. So we definitely need that before we can create the template. Now, when a valid name is entered, you'll see the field go from a red outline to a green, letting the user know that we can now save this template. And when we hit create template, we make an API call to the backend, we save that template, and upon return, we check for a success or an error. And upon success, we display a success alert. Upon error, we display an error alert. So this is all just for UI validation for the user so that they know exactly what is happening in terms of their template. Now that's the create template form. Let's dive into the edit existing template. This is a little bit more involved. There's a search box first so that we can pull up a certain template. So upon entering in a template name, we make another API call. If the template exists for that name, we'll pull into the edit existing template form. Otherwise, we'll have an alert saying, no forms were found. But the edit template form is very similar to the create template form, but it's pre-populated with the data from the database. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. It's just a Bootstrap form. The name is still required. So if you were to delete that name and try to save it, we wouldn't allow you to do that. But when you do save it, again, API is called and we check for success or error. And depending on what happened, we would display that specific alert. And that's about it for the template forms in terms of functionality.
Lastly, I will talk about the minor features we did. So for this project, the first minor feature we did is backups. So every time a change is made, a temporary backup is recorded, and every month a long-term backup is generated. This is all saved in the back end, so the front end you don't really see that much about the backups, but it is there. Another minor feature we have is secure login. Secure login requires a valid username and password, and this you're not able to make an account on the website, but you're able to make an account using the back end side. And from there, you're able to log in with that username and password. Only the people with access to the database can add new accounts. The last minor feature we did is alerts. Alert give the user feedback on the actions they've done. So once a user adds a form or deletes a form or edits a form, we want them to know that, yes, this was successful or some error has come up. And that's the minor features we've added.
Our development process started off with research. After receiving our sponsor, we almost immediately began looking into technologies that would assist us in successfully meeting the requirements in the time frame we had been given. The group would individually research, and then we would discuss our findings when we met again. As a group, we would discuss pros and cons, and then we would decide on the technology. Once the tech we used was decided, we drafted the user features that the finished product would have and presented them to our sponsor, Josh. After some retooling based on his input and conversations, we moved forward with our tech and the features. The most important thing for me in the development process was our ability to work together and collaborate. To this end, we met twice a week for 2 hours, where we would discuss the status of the app, collaborate, and work through problems, often in smaller breakout rooms. The team was technically split up into 2 groups, front end and back end, but these divisions were occasionally thin, and members from the back end ended up doing some really amazing work to give the front end access to the back end, serving as a pseudo middleware team, while the front end set up many of the crucial front end components. After the project was off the ground and there was a working demo, we began to work in 2-week sprints, where at the end of each, we would meet with Josh and receive further input on our project, which we would take back, discuss during the following meeting, and get right back to working.
Hey, so for the backend, we decided to use Amazon Web Services. And the main reason why we went with AWS is because it offers a lot of services, such as API Gateway and Lambda, which is the main services that we use for this project. And for the database, we decided to use DynamoDB because it is a database that is easy to work with and it's document-based, meaning that you can use NoSQL instead of regular SQL to query and index the data. And another thing is that it's scalable, meaning it's very easy to add new fields to each data, which is something that we saw ourselves doing constantly by adding various fields. Here in the image, you can see that we use JSON for the documents. You can use NoSQL, and you can set up indexes, which make it easier and more efficient to parse through and index the data.
So on top of the backend is API Gateway. It controls the routing and the endpoint for every method that sits in backend. On React, backend package is created for frontend to communicate on endpoint of API Gateway with ease. Backend and API Gateway communicate through HTTPS calls with a secure API key.
In order to provide all of the functionality that our client required from the database, we used Lambda functions, which is Amazon's serverless function offering. These allowed us to avoid complicated JSON mappings in the API gateway and instead use the API gateway as a proxy for our Lambda functions, thus allowing us to write in easy-to-use languages like Python. The Lambda functions not only provided a very easy SDK, they also provided a great testing environment to make sure that these functions were up to par for our client. This provided us a very powerful and efficient way of querying our client's database to get them what they want. One important element of this project for our client was the ability to search the chemical records by a variety of different fields, these being location, product name, and finally date. Because this isn't SQL, we don't have things like select and join to do easy searches, and so in order to accomplish this, we used GSIs, known as global secondary indexes, things that Amazon provides in order to architect our database in a way that we could naturally draw out those searches.
For testing, we were able to incorporate integrated testing within the Lambda functions, and that's just an additional thing that AWS provides. And we wanted to make sure that the get, delete, edit, all those methods worked properly, because even though it works on our end, it might not work on the front end. So it was just another way to verify that all our methods work.
The languages that we use to make the web app are usual suspects that you would expect to see in any modern day web application, that being HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the majority of the project being written in JavaScript. We also utilized a framework called React-Bootstrap, which is a combination of React and Bootstrap, React being the library for JavaScript and Bootstrap being the framework for CSS. React-Bootstrap is this library that builds React components from Bootstrap components, so you can just directly use these things instead of importing Bootstrap and dealing with it that way. It's obviously also compatible with Bootstrap, so this allowed us to use thousands of CSS styles if we wanted to just write in our code instead of, again, worrying about importing the necessary things. And then it's also very accessible and responsive just out of the box. It's not anything we had to worry about programming, making sure that the layout is right for certain viewports or anything like that. It's just kind of out of the box, already set to go. This was very vital to our process. We utilized React-Bootstrap throughout 95% of our project. From a bird's eye kind of view of the design pattern that we use, this is a single page application. Typically, in a web application, the server will serve up different HTML files according to the different pages in the application. For our application, it's just one page that is dynamically re-rendered every single time you go to a different page, right? Or every single time an API is called. It's doing that in the background. We're using a lot of API calls, a lot of fetches, or even just like general ability of JavaScript to manipulate the DOM. This obviously allows for really rich interaction between the user and the app. For example, we have functionality to search for forms, and when the user searches a form, a table is rendered of all the forms that match the search query. This would be not impossible to do in a traditional sense, but it's much easier and much more fluid in a single page application. So that's why we chose to do it this way. It's also the way that majority of React apps are written, and probably majority of web apps are written now today.
One of the obstacles that we faced as a team was integrating the back end and the front end. The main reason is because, well, one, we're all beginners, and then two, we initially divided into two teams, essentially one for back end and one for front end. And then as the project progressed, eventually had to integrate the whole thing. It was really difficult integrating just because there were a lot of parts to it, but eventually once we were able to figure out how the API calls worked on the React and how we had to import some libraries, the process became a lot smoother.
Another obstacle we ran into throughout the production of the calendar component was using state object values equivalent to functional hooks. We would, for example, set a value for one of the state objects, and then we would use that object, and the value of that object would be undefined. This took learning about the call order for React and could be mitigated by doing things like using local storage or changing the component's call order.
Yeah, functionally it seems to be looking good. Yeah, visually looks good. I'm really I'm really happy with how the calendar is looking, and it turned out. Like I said, just seems like there's like a few minor aesthetic things, but yeah, those are like super minor things that are like really easy to fix and quick. So